Who are we? We are the ones who step up for each other. I've got your back. You've got mine. Kindness, humility, empathy. It's not just talk. It's who we are. It's who we always have been. And no one can take that from us. The movement to bring it back, it started here. And here. And here. In school gymnasiums, community centers, the living room down the block. You'll be where? Okay, we'll be there. Who are we? We're the movement that will beat Donald Trump. Welcome. We're going to have to sweat for it. We're going to have to sacrifice and fight. You're going to have to lead. Everyone is going to have to lead with kindness, humility, empathy, and not just talk, but action. Action today, action tomorrow. Action until we win. We will win. We do this together. It's who we are. It's who we always have been. Now let's show them.
Thank you for joining this Biden-Harris campaign Make It Happen Monday event. And now, please welcome Biden-Harris Campaign Director of African American Engagement, Trey Baker.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Make It Happen Monday. This is our Black Business Engagement program that we do here on the Biden campaign, and particularly in our African American Engagement department. These conversations are so important, and we just want to thank you for coming here on your Labor Day holiday to talk about Black business and to talk about how we're going to move forward with the Biden-Harris campaign to make sure that our community is taken care of. As many of you know, it's being said right now that 40% of Black-owned businesses will not recover at all from COVID-19. And that kind of hit in our community is just going to be disastrous. And because of that, we think it's so important that we have these conversations and that we share with you about what the Biden-Harris plan for recovery, particularly for Black business, will do, and why it's so important that we have these discussions, let you know how we can help people to recover, and then more so that we can build back better, and that businesses can grow, and they can expand, and that they'll have resources, especially to the tune of $150 billion in access to capital. So we have a great conversation for you tonight. We have some of our good friends from across the country who are supportive and will be really putting on a good roundtable discussion and also a good featured segment talking about some of the recent support that we got in this campaign. So with no further ado, I will turn you all over to our host for the evening, but I want you to all do one thing. I want you to pick up your phones and I want you to text 30330. Text AFAM, A-F-A-M. If you text AFAM to 30330, that will lock you in to getting updates from the African American portfolio and lock you into being able to hear about other great events like Make It Happen Monday, like our Shop Talk, and we'll be able to continue to be in contact with you over the next 56 days. So with that said, I do want to turn you over to our host, Binita Brown, who is an entrepreneur and big supporter of this campaign, and Michael Blake, who is the DNC Vice Chair. So I'll turn it over to you, Michael and Binita.
Thank you, Trey. Good evening, everybody. Great to see you all virtually in this new normal that we are all in. And thank you, Trey, for all that you continue to do in mobilizing our African American engagement program nationally. Happy Labor Day. Let us all thank our union brothers and sisters, not just for today, but for the weekend, for benefits, for collective bargaining, et cetera. And all the way through. I'm Michael Blake. I am one of your DNC vice chairs and an assembly member here in New York, along with Binita Brown and Chris Upperman and Trey. We come to you to host this weekly conversation. We want everybody to know every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, we have these conversations specifically around what are we doing to help the Black business community when it comes to the Biden-Harris agenda of increasing access to capital. Changing what happens within the administration, when we do the work that we need to be elected, so that we make it easier for contracts and counseling. What do we do to reform the processes so that we make it easier for people to have a chance to get in the game? From the restart package of $50 billion to the expanded money that would have to go out to CDFIs or the Minority Business Development Agency and have access to lending, et cetera. We would encourage you all to invite others to join this conversation happening tonight. And as Trey mentioned, text AFAM, AFAM to 30330. That's how you get plugged into our programs accordingly. Very final housekeeping before turning this over to Binita. This continual conversation, which we're excited about tonight, and three phenomenal panelists who will be able to talk about what are we doing, and especially to support our Black women entrepreneurs. What are we doing to make sure the efforts for the later this year and next year provide, again, that access to capital and contracting and we need to have happen. But we want to hear from you on what needs to change and how do we do this better as a team and administration moving forward. But in order to do that, we have to win. As Congressman Cedric Richmond always reminds us, it's great to focus on governing, but you have to win the campaign first. So there are many things that are coming up, including on this week, our African American Leadership Council, which is our finance arm, is hosting an event this Thursday night featuring Whip Jim Clyburn. This Thursday night. We will make sure that we get you the link in the chat, everyone. It's a great fundraiser. We want you to support that. There's also a fundraiser this Thursday night featuring our campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, Ambassador Susan Rice, and David Plouffe for Obama, Biden alumni and friends to participate in. We want you to be a part of that and aware of that as we're moving forward in order for us to do these things. Lastly, tying this together, we need people to help us volunteer. Again, we're talking about campaigns, we're talking about policy, but we have to win the campaign first. So whether it be our virtual phone banks, our texting programs, hosting a virtual campaign office, which I'll be doing starting tomorrow night each week, there are ways that we can get you in the game so that we can make it happen, not just on Monday, but every day. And so if you are ready and willing and you know what's at stake, we need your help. We need you to mobilize. We need to fundraise. We need to get registration out. We need voter protection. But we got to make sure we support our businesses. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Binita Brown for opening comments. And then Binita and Chris will then turn it over to our great panelists for tonight, who I had a great pleasure of working with over the years. And very specifically, we want to figure out what do we need to be doing to help the Black business community in the immediate? What do we need to hear from you to understand what we got to do once we get a President Biden and a Vice President Harris into the administration. So thank you for being on Make It Happen Mondays, and Binita, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Blake. Welcome. I join in welcoming everybody to Make It Happen Mondays, and in expressing gratitude to Trey and to Chris, as well as to our panelists, whom we're going to introduce in a second. It's a great pleasure to be able to do this every week. And tonight's panel, I think, is particularly interesting and timely, given our exploration of the issues facing Black business and Black people in America today. I'll start off by just sharing a little bit of an anecdote. I guess it was about 8 years ago, coming up this December, I had multiple bilateral pulmonary embolus, which is a very fancy way of saying multiple blood clots in each lung. This was the second big health event I had endured after having multi-organ failure just several years prior. After that, I came back super resilient, very strong, running half marathons, all kinds of different professional accomplishments, involvement in political campaigns. It was great. But for some strange reason, this second time I was sidelined a little bit. I lost a little bit of my confidence. I decided to leave my law practice. I was looking to raise capital for a new company, an issue that all of us can appreciate, given that we're Black entrepreneurs or Black business people, trying to figure out ways of making it happen. And it's difficult, as we all know. It's difficult to raise capital. It's difficult to start a new business. It's difficult to be a solo entrepreneur. But I was, by virtue of reputation and also by virtue of sort of the societal, sometimes people think it's a compliment, but it's also a constraint, that we as Black women are strong and resilient and we always bounce back. It was difficult. And so I didn't have the ability to ask for help in all of the different ways that I needed to ask for help. Why do I share all of this tonight? Because our panelists tonight are entrepreneurs who are, we have a Black woman entrepreneur who is specifically focused on the needs of Black women and Black female entrepreneurship. In Darien Hall, we have an entrepreneur who is paying specific attention to mental health and to wellness. And these are things that are vital for us to discuss, because with 40% of our businesses, threatened in the way that has already been articulated tonight, with all that we are carrying as Black folks, with the generational burden of racism, not to mention COVID, not to mention all of the other stresses that we endure and encounter every day. Certainly resilience and our wellness and coming together in these particularly important ways, these are places where we need to be focused, right? Because in order for us to come back, in order for us to build back better, in order for us to be able to even get ourselves to the polls, we have to be feeling good, we have to be feeling strong, and this is the way we're going to keep our communities going, so that we can participate in the goodness that we hope not that we hope, that we know that once Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are elected, that we can participate and have the ability and the mental stamina and strength that's necessary to turn our businesses around. So with all of that said, I'm gonna, and Mr. Clooney, I did not skip you, but you have a special announcement. So I gave a very, very brief overviews of two of the other panelists, but I wanna go next to David Clooney, who's the head of the Black Economic Alliance PAC, who has something very specific he'd like to share with this audience tonight. See, this is why, even on Labor Day, it's important for y'all to come out, right? And this is no disrespect to our laborers or the people who are the foundation of our economy, but it is important for us to stay motivated and to keep things going so that we can make it happen. So, Mr. Clooney, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Binta, and thank you all, to old friends and new. Good to see familiar faces, friendly faces, and happy Labor Day to those who joined. I'm David Clooney. I'm the executive director of the Black Economic Alliance. We have a number of different parts of our organization. One is a political action committee. And for background, the Black Economic Alliance is a group of Black business leaders that came together after the 2016 election, and it's Black CEOs, senior executives, and others, and had a meeting to figure out how we could drive better outcomes for Black folks, particularly in the areas of work, wages, and wealth, with a recognition that we just were not getting the type of return on investment for our engagement in politics that we need to. And there was a recognition among the folks who started this group and who now drive it, that they had been very successful at business, and they were investing in politics in a way that they would never invest in business, which is to say with no strategy, with no collective ask. So our group came together to be very strategic about whom we support politically and what we ask for. And what we ask for is simply for them to prioritize, understand, and drive better policy outcomes for Black folks economically, with a specific focus on economic progress and closing the wealth gap for Black folks. So with that backdrop, we were very excited last week, and I'm excited to be with you here tonight to talk about the Black Economic Alliance PAC's endorsement of Joe Biden for president and Kamala Harris for vice president. Throughout the campaign, we've been meeting with different different presidential candidates, and we are a nonpartisan organization, which is very important. We think these issues require attention from all sides of the political spectrum, and we need to and do work with everybody, from folks in the current administration to folks in the Senate, in both parties, in the House, and at the state level as well. Throughout our time talking to each candidate, we got to know where their heads were, who they put in place. And I can say with a lot of confidence that over the last few months working with the Biden campaign, folks like Trey Baker, seeing the folks they have put in place, like Karine Jean-Pierre, Simone Sanders, having the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Cedric Richmond as national campaign chair. Obviously, they are taking seriously the need to do things differently in 2020. And I can appreciate that there's more than just getting back to the good old days, if you will. And there's a recognition that the good old days were never good enough for Black folks, and that we need to really be thinking about systems change, about systemic change, and with the substantive things we've been talking about how we close the wealth gap, how we support small businesses, how we increase access to capital, and how we're going to do that in a different way than we've ever done it, and how we're going to put people in place in the next administration who look like us and who understand the Black experience, like Kamala Harris, an HU grad, like Natalie and myself. And it's really just a recognition that more of the same is not good enough, and that we also can't just continue to build on a faulty foundation. As Binta said, I appreciate that we are having a different type of conversation in 2020 than we've ever had before about systemic racism and about what that has meant for our ability to grow businesses, our ability to get access to capital, access to support. And I come from, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the panel, but one of the focuses of the Black Economic Alliance is building wealth, building generational wealth for Black folks. I talked about this a little bit last week at the March on Washington, and we know that home ownership and entrepreneurship have been the two largest builders of wealth for Americans over generations, and that Black folks have systemically not only not had the opportunity to have the same access, but systemically been kept out. So I will leave it there and just say the Black Economic Alliance PAC is extremely excited to be behind and really working alongside the Biden-Harris ticket. And I look forward to a great conversation tonight and all the great work we're going to do together in the next couple of weeks and lead up to the election, and then after we're successful in November.
Hi, I'm Chris Supperman, and really do appreciate it, David, for your comments. I'm a moderator for this evening, working alongside Trey, Michael, and Binta. I wanted to give a special shout out also to our media partner, Black Enterprise, who is broadcasting this across their social channels. We really are appreciative of their support. And once again, follow us every week. This is what we're doing every Monday, so we're making it happen. With that, we're going to go right back to Binta and Michael, and we're going to dive right in for this conversation that you all have logged in for this evening.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody. So, this is a vision of how we build and grow from here itself, and very specifically, what do we do to help the Black business agenda? Very practically, very real. And we already heard from one of our three great panelists for tonight. Let us bring in the other two, Natalie and Darian, at this moment to not only talk through what's happening within both of their respective work, but very concretely, what we've asked each week, what is it that you want to see from a Biden-Harris administration to help Black business? Very specifically, whether that be access to capital, whether that be contracting, whether it be just changing the game to make it fairer and easier for our different allies. And if there was one thing that you would want to see happen within the campaign to elevate Black business, and one thing you would want to see within the administration, what would that be? So allow us first to go to Natalie and then go to Darian to introduce themselves, talk about the work that they're both doing, and then really hammer home on that core question. What do you want to see from the campaign as it relates to Black business, and what do you want to see from a Biden-Harris administration around Black business as we move forward? So Natalie, we turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, Chris, Binta, and David. It was great to hear from you. So as you just heard from Michael, my name is Natalie Madeira-Cofield. I'm the founder of Walker's Legacy. Walker's Legacy is a national women's organization designed to empower African-American women through entrepreneurship and self-efficacy. Walker's Legacy has chapters in 15 cities across the country. So I'll start first just by saying that in today's time, to have a conversation about Black business must include at the forefront the Black woman. Why? Because 58.9% of all Black businesses started over the course of the last 10 years have been started and run by Black women. Furthermore, when we look at our Black community, we see that 80% of all Black households are led by a primary breadwinning Black woman. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship and we talk about economic development, we would be absolutely remiss and totally off target if we just put some red coloring on something and call it the Women in Business Initiative and did not focus our efforts primarily and wholeheartedly on empowering Black women as it relates to entrepreneurship. Furthermore, when we look at women entrepreneurship across the country, we see that Black women make up 45% of all minority-led women-owned firms in the US, which is a disproportionately higher number of women-owned businesses in the country. And Black women are starting businesses at 6 times the national average, with an average growth rate of roughly 300% over the course of the last year. Again, I say, we can't have a conversation about Black business without having the Black woman with a full and proper seat at the table. It's not an afterthought. It's not an initiative. It is a full and proper seat at the table. With that being said, we still see discrepancies that exist for multiple reasons. The intersectional nature of what it means to be a woman of color, as it relates to entrepreneurship, where women still fare and are receiving less gross receipts than their male contemporaries, whether they be in the same ethnic demographic or not, is still a major issue. The average Black woman's gross receipts is roughly $26,000. The average Black man's gross receipt for their business is roughly $100,000 in comparison to the average white man's gross receipts for his company, which is nearly $800,000. Furthermore, when we're talking about Black women, we also need to talk about the average net income of a Black woman. Take all your assets, deduct all your liabilities, and now we're talking about something that's in the ballpark of, depending upon which research study you're looking at, anywhere from $5 to $100. In contrast to our white female counterparts, which is anywhere from $41,000 to $42,000. So in answering your question, Mike, these are the ways in which I feel that we need to be able to close the gap. Number one, we need to close the wage gap. Why? Because closing the wage gap allows for more Black women to have disposable income necessary to create businesses. People are leaving jobs, whether by their own volition or whether by the company closing or having downsizing. And we have seen an increase in Black female entrepreneurship as a major byproduct of the recession that we previously experienced and the one that we're experiencing right now. Giving women access to an equitable, fair wage allows for them to be able to go off and create the businesses that they need and to have the financial income that they need to sustain them. Giving Black women and women access to capital. We see Black women are able to have access to capital at only $10,000, less than $10,000 actually, in comparison to $20,000 is the average loan size for their white counterparts. And so what does it mean to close that $10,000 delta? It means giving people more access and awareness of the Black community, the Black consumer, and the Black marketplace. So many times people write off the Black consumer, even though we are one of the largest consuming populations in the nation, because they don't understand how we buy, where we buy, and when we buy. And given that nature, it's also difficult to raise funds for your business, which is another reason why Black women-owned firms only receive less than 1% of all VC-backed funding. But we already know that 99.95% of businesses in the United States don't receive VC funds. So we need to focus our energy there, but also focus our energy on getting capital into the hands of businesses on Main Street and on Wall Street through large financial institutions, as well as community development financial institutions, as well as alternative financing models, which we are seeing sprouting up all across the country, particularly during COVID. And so it requires that they have both an appreciation and an understanding for the Black consumer. And we are seeing astronomical growth in these industries and in this particular marketplace as it relates to the African Americans and particularly for Black women. The next thing I would say, and I champion my brother Ron Busby, who was on a previous call, making access to the actual invoices that you have already fulfilled. That is capital in and of itself. That's not capital through debt financing. That's not capital through equity financing. That's capital through work that was done that needs to be delivered on terms and within payment conditions that are more in alignment with where Black-owned businesses are, which means that we need to get 15 to 30-day payment terms for our small businesses. 60, 90, 120-day payment terms have the potential to put Black businesses out of business. Why? Because of access to capital limitations. So those would be a few of the recommendations that I would make. And I would certainly make those recommendations on behalf of all Black businesses, but most certainly on behalf of Black women-led businesses, which are driving the U.S. economy.
Darren, you're going to have to come drop the mic, brother. Because
Thank you for letting me go before Natalie. I appreciate that. Go ahead.
I just say, like, I mean, Darren, I mean, this is,
Go ahead.
yeah, Darian. I'm not even going to, Darian.
No, first of all, thank you guys for including me in on this very important and timely conversation. My name is Darian Hall. I'm the co-founder of Heal House, which is it's a wellness company and holistic cafe based in Brooklyn, New York. And what we do, we facilitate daily yoga classes and meditation classes. We also do a variety of different workshops that deal with mental health. And in addition to that, we do private practitioner services such as therapy. I kind of want to speak to what's going on in the local level in New York specifically. This is a very personal conversation for me because I have so many friends that are also entrepreneurs and business owners that frankly are not going to make it through these next couple months. I was fortunate enough where I was able to receive some of the PPP funding and the EIDL funding. And even that process for me, I had to make sure everything was on point, right? I had a relationship with our bank, and when those applications went up online, I was on it, right? And then there were so many other people that might not have had that relationship with a bank, or they might not have known the ins and outs of the paperwork that they might have needed, and they missed out on getting some of that funding. In addition, to speak to specifically, what I would like to see from the Biden and Harris team is when funds are given out like that, it was extremely frustrating to see these big, multi-million-dollar and some billion-dollar businesses receiving funding when you had mom and pop businesses that were not receiving some of that funding, and you had some of these other businesses that were receiving millions of dollars that didn't really need it. And so it's a frustration as a Black business owner watching, my friends that are not going to make it because they didn't receive any of that funding that did go to some of these other businesses that, did have other resources and did have the connections that they could have tapped into. So for me, this is a very personal conversation, and it's going to really affect our community if we don't figure out something in the short term in these next couple of months. Especially people that have any type of business with a brick and mortar that are paying rent. There were a couple of months where they were able to get away without being evicted, but those restrictions have been removed. So, now landlords are able to kick these business owners out of their business. So what happens to those mom and pop businesses that were not making money these last couple of months, and now there are no protections in place, that there are no protections in place to protect them from the landlords from evicting them? That's the conversation I really want to have, because that's what we're living in right now.
Binta, I want to turn it over to you, Binta, for some of our initial questions.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for your remarks. There so many things. We don't have enough time to get into all of the stuff that's been raised this evening. First, I'm going to actually kick it to Natalie, who made such a wonderful point about moving up payment terms to net 15 or net 30 from a liquidity perspective and a cash flow perspective. Since access to capital in terms of PPP and other things is a little bit short, not even a little bit short, but like less likely, getting stuff paid on time and quickly is an important lifeline. But here's the thing, and this is the question for Natalie, is that requires enforcement of contract, right? And so how do we get to our contracts being better enforced? And have you seen issues where Black women's contracts have been broken or breached more often or differently than other constituency groups in the business space? Like, is there a sense that we need to do something more to protect the sanctity of contract when it comes to contracts made with Black women business owners?
Yeah, and again, I'll speak on behalf of all Black businesses, including, Black women. A couple of things. The 8A program is one of the only programs that the federal government has as a contracting vehicle for which someone graduates. They graduate once they have reached the 8-year mark. That program was initially created to provide access to contracting opportunities for minorities. It is now a broader program. And so I would say, why graduate from that program when you don't graduate from the Hub Zone program, when you don't graduate from the veteran program, when you don't graduate from the Women's Own certification program? Why do you have to graduate from a program that is recognizing the historical and institutionalized nature of you being a person of color and all that comes with that? So that's another thing. The other thing is that I don't think a lot of times people think about, again, how the intersectional nature of being a woman of color and being a woman plays itself out as it relates to contracting. At the state and in some cases, the federal levels, women of color they have to choose between their race and they have to choose between their gender. Here's a classic example of such. If you decide to go after a particular contract at the local or federal level, you may have to elect that you are a woman-owned business. Okay, well, that puts you in the same primary market where people who have access to greater resources and funds than you do, but they're still in the same gender group as you, and that's great. If you choose to go for your minority status and or your ethnic group, you are now put in a bullpen with men, which is now still there's a disconnect there, and it's still not in the same circumstance that white women have to play. And that is in and of itself something that people should be doing more research on. When we did look at the 5% set aside rule that existed for women-owned businesses, we noticed that there's no actual data that exists for how many women of color owned firms are actually receiving funds under the 5% set aside rule that the SBA has. Well, we asked the questions about that. We expect to see, as women of color, that roughly 40% of that 5% is allocated toward women of color. Why? Because women of color represent 40% of all women-owned firms in the U.S. And it's important that if there's a 5% set-aside rule for women, that women of color have equal access to that, given, again, the nature of our intersectional being, right, which has limited access to capital, limited access to contracts, and limited access to, most importantly, social capital. As it relates to payment terms and what we have seen, the truth of the matter is that what we have seen more than payment terms that have not been enforced is payment terms that are automatically at more discounted rates because there is an awareness that this is a minority-owned firm. And that is, to me, of more concern in some instances than the enforcement on the back end, because at the end of the day, what you bring home in gross receipts, whether you got it on the 90 or 120 day, is what you brought home in gross receipts. So if we have an inherent structure of being discriminatory as it relates to how much we are willing to pay for one service from company A and how much we are willing to pay for one service from company B, I think that there's something that can be done about what the actual circumstance is here, given the circumstance of these two companies competing against the same contract opportunity, and looking at the historical nature of the awarding of that contract so we can see whether this was brought in at a significant discount. And this isn't just for competitively bid contracts. This is for non-competitively bid contracts, which the federal government engages in all the time. There are set-asides, there are non-competes, there are all kinds of contracting opportunities. And I think what we do a lot of times is focus our energy on the competitive bid. I can say, oh, this person came in 2 cents less than the other person, and therefore I'm going with them. But what about the millions and billions of dollars that are passed through to small businesses that are not competed for and that are not competed for equitably?
That's fantastic. So just to clarify for our audience, so Natalie's speaking to, and is perhaps obvious to everyone and listening, by and large is speaking to federal contracting. My question was really about private contracts. And so my hope is that we can look into this, because what I suspect is that not only is there a discount in private contracts as well as federal contracts, not a discount, we shouldn't say discount, a price discrimination is what we should call it, really. You know, like where people are being paid differently for the same service. And we likely have to also look into the legal infrastructure that goes into enforcement, which is something that, at least on the federal side, I know that the Biden-Harris plan is thinking about and is focusing on, is that there's an understanding is that we need to do a better job when it comes to enforcement. I want to turn things over to Darian for just a quick second. Darian, you mentioned that many of your fellow entrepreneurs in New York are struggling and won't make it through the next couple of months. You happen to, your business is a wellness business. And so I was just hoping that for a second, you know, like since we've got you, that you could speak a little bit about how it is you are encouraging through your business folks to be resilient in this environment. And what does resilience look like when it seems like everything has been stripped away and there would otherwise seem to be a feeling of, you know, I don't want to be too dour, you know, but a pervasive hopelessness I see setting in amongst many people.
Right. I think this is a very, you know, trying time for a lot of people. And I think it has put even more of a spotlight on the type of work that we do at Hill House. I mean, before COVID hit, everything that we did was facilitated in the physical studio in Brooklyn. So unless you were in Brooklyn, you might have been seeing our name, you know, in press or seeing us online, but you couldn't really access the programming we were doing. But when COVID hit, we were actually able to transition everything online. So our reach has expanded throughout the whole country now. And so what we're seeing is people coming onto our classes, and we're really going through this together. And I'm taking the classes with people, and it was amazing to just kind of see the transition that's been happening over the past couple of months, and that sense of community and realizing we were going through it together. That's been the biggest help. But those first couple of months when we were doing classes, or whether it was a yoga class or a meditation class, and there was a lot of fear and a lot of worry from people all across the country. And you know, I don't think we're by any means out of the woods or anything, but watching people's reaction from the work that we were providing and what we were facilitating has been amazing. And you know, the only thing that I really try to tell people is that there's certain things that are out of our control, right? And for me, what has helped me through this moment is just surrendering. There's certain things that are out of our control, but the things that are in our control, to do our best to get through this moment. And then I think once you kind of take that mindset and accept that you're surrendering to it all, it allows you to get through this in a much more peaceful way. The very beginning, I was trying to control everything and I was driving myself crazy. And it wasn't until I actually surrendered to it, I mentally started getting into a better place.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Mr.
Binta.
Blake,
Go ahead, Binta. Finish your comment and I'll follow up.
Not a comment so much as just a desire to bring David back into the conversation. I know that there was more that you had planned to say in your opening remarks. You said that you were going to reserve it for later, so I want to make sure that we're giving you an opportunity to say that now. And then perhaps we'll follow up with a question. And not to steal thunder from Mr. Blake, but if you could also keep in mind his big overarching questions in terms of what are you looking for and what needs to be done better, that would be great, particularly given your vantage point as head of the Black Economic Alliance PAC.
Sure. So I'll say two main things. There's a lot we want, and we will be very bold in our asks, as the campaign knows we have been already, and we will continue to be. But the two main things are thinking broadly and systemically about what it's going to take to provide solutions to these problems. Access to capital. I think we've in the past, and when I say we, the government, policymakers and others will put together one bill and say we've checked the box, we move on to the next thing. access to capital, particularly for Black folks, but in general, our financial system. And I come from a background working at a major financial firm, working at the Treasury Department before that as an Obama appointee. There are multiple things we have to do to democratize the way that people get access to capital. Natalie has talked about it very well. And I'll say, one of the ways I put it in context is McKinsey put out a report in 2019, just last year, that showed if you were to close the wealth gap, the Black-white wealth gap, you could add between 4 to 6% growth to real US GDP by 2028. That is, as we're talking about how we plug up the holes and recover our economy in a systemic way, you absolutely have to talk about how you fix the problems of Black folks not having equal access to capital, access to opportunity, pay equity. So what I'm asking for, and what we are asking for, is to look at, if you talk about access to capital, for example, firing on all cylinders, not just looking at, there's a bill that's moving through the Senate now that the Black Economic Alliance has been pushing, called the Jobs and Neighborhood Investment Act. There are 2 House companion bills, one from Maxine Waters and Greg Meeks. And that is a great effort to get billions of dollars to community development financial institutions and minority depository institutions, which are really the entities that have been lending to our folks as an alternative to the traditional banking system. That is not a silver bullet. That is just one of many ways we need to look at how we systemically can change access to capital for Black folks. We also need to work with the private sector. And I'm happy to say that in the racial equity plan, that is one of the pillars of the Build Back Better plan, the Biden-Harris Build Back Better plan, it talks about the need to have public-private partnerships, small business support in a number of different ways. And we need to look at what the private sector can do. And I remember this from my time at a financial institution, to increase access to capital as well. There was a major bank, a national bank, that made, for example, 16 loans over 6 years on the south and west sides of Chicago, 16 to Black home borrowers, 16 in 6 years. And if you say that race is not a factor, and also looking at the cost of capital, the government has the ability, for example, to require financial institutions, public and private, to start keeping numbers on what they are charging their different customers. It's tough because a lot of financial institutions don't keep race information, but I think we need to improve and increase the amount of data that is out there, pushing on the public, private, and even figuring out nonprofit solutions as well to some of these problems. So answer number one is, if you're talking about access to capital, any of the issues we're talking about, thinking systemically and not just doing one thing to check the box. I appreciate that they're looking at things like reinstating the state small business credit initiative, propping up CDFI funding, working on public-private partnerships like I talked about. There are a number of different things we need to do at the same time to actually move the needle. So that is one. Number two is actually addressing a question that I saw come in the chat, which is who is making these decisions? Who are the folks at the table? I know from being at the Treasury Department, there have been 77 secretaries of the Treasury. 0 of them have been women. 0 of them have been people of color. They have all been white men. And that is one position we're talking about. So I am very bullish on how the Biden-Harris administration is looking at putting people in place who will be voices for their own experience and the Black experience as we democratize how Black folks participate in what has to be the most inclusive economy we've ever had.
I just want to emphasize something that David said. There is so much good information. This is a fantastic panel, by the way. There is so much good information what you just shared with us, but it speaks to a larger point, which is that you said that that if you close the wealth gap between Blacks and white folks in America, that the GDP grows. The GDP doesn't stay the same. GDP actually grows. And the reason why I'm choosing to emphasize that right now is because there is this persistent belief that is wrong in the United States, where we think that by creating opportunity for other people, that we're actually giving up something ourselves. We think that by creating opportunity for Black folks, for women, that we are that other people are having to lose. And that's the wrong way to think about it, because by creating opportunity, what we're actually doing is we're growing the pie. We're giving everybody a chance to participate. And even those who are already participating are going to continue to benefit. which is essential for us to understand and to emphasize. And the reason why I'm honing in on this is because currently with a divided government, currently with a divided population, with a population that is split when it comes to race and racism, with the kind of unjust that we've been experiencing, not just recently, but for 400 years, with this idea that there are two Americas, if we can figure out a way through a Biden-Harris administration to start coming back together, or to come together at all, then we have a profound opportunity to not only make sure that there is inclusiveness in the cabinet, but also to make sure, I would argue most importantly, as Black folks, that there's an opportunity for us to grow this pie, and for Black folks to finally have the opportunity to participate in that growth, to no longer be gentrified or to be shut out or to be pushed off, but to actually participate in the economic growth, which is essential to our survival. Mr. Blake, I want to turn it back over to you in case you have any additional questions for the panel.
So one in, Natalie said, each of you said something very specific here that's relevant and critical. Natalie made mention that there is no good reason for the graduation of the 8A program. I've never really understood why we have different approaches there itself. Darian made very clear something that we've all been talking about around the continual frustration of larger institutions that got access to this money in PPP when they didn't need it, when a lot of our smaller entities needed it. And as David talked through very specifically and directly, the importance of thinking about transition, having a Black Treasury Secretary and other roles such as that will matter as we're moving the ball forward here. As we have our final 10 minutes here and the comments that are here, one thing I want to be sensitive to that I will say, we do not have the answer on this call, but I make the commitment we will have the answer for you next call. Someone asked very concretely, what is the share of Black-owned businesses getting access to contracts from the campaign? That is something several of us have talked about throughout, and we will make sure we bring that up to you. It's something that is very important to me. I ran the MWE portfolio at the White House, so I'm constantly thinking about this regularly. We make that commitment to get you that answer next week. And very concretely, not just the number, but also the share. I understand that is something that is important there itself. Second, to the questions being asked about moving the needle forward, I placed in the chat 2 links that everyone on this call to utilize moving forward throughout the campaign. Lift Every Voice being our collective vision for Black America, and it's specifically around racial equity, which is specific around Black business itself. Concrete ideas, suggestions to move the ball forward. And as we've talked about, there has to be some major reforms within the government to be able to do this as well. Last, again, housekeeping here. Next Monday, we go back to state-specific calls, Ohio and Minnesota being those universes. So for everyone that has Black businesses in Ohio and Minnesota, we want you to be thinking about that now to invite them on for next week. Anyone is welcome to join. But at the end of the day, we want to be mindful of that. I want to ask one very quick rapid fire question to the 3 of you as we prepare to wrap up here. The role of CEOs and CEOs matters at a range of different aspects, right? Whether someone's a sole proprietor, someone has 10, 50, 100, et cetera. We don't talk about that enough. And I am tired of people always talking about Black business and making it synonymous with small business. That's not the same thing, right? So would love to hear from the 3 of you the role and responsibilities of CEO engagement in this conversation, in which you all obviously see it from very different perspectives, whether it be collaborating with CEOs as David does on the BEA side, our women CEOs that Natalie does every single day, and Darian, as a fellow New Yorker, our CEOs on the ground who also don't get that. Well, Natalie is also a fellow New Yorker. She got Rochester, but we in the city. So you understand what I mean right there, right? So, but to that point, would love to hear from you all the role of CEOs in these and how that's necessary for moving forward as well. David, we'll start with you.
I actually want to refine Michael's question. I would actually expand it to be CEOs as well as boards, corporate boards.
I appreciate that question, and there is absolutely a role as we talk about We've seen an unprecedented level of messaging and activity from the private sector in the last, let's call it 3 months, particularly since George Floyd's murder, talking about what Black people mean to these organizations as consumers, as stakeholders, what have you. Now's the time to put action to that. And as I talked about earlier, we are really looking for the Biden-Harris administration to work with the business community. They have to hold them accountable, of course, but also have them at the table as you're thinking about what part do we have to play what part does the administration have to play as the government, and what role does the private sector have to play? If you're talking about, again, access to capital as an example, CEOs, CEOs, basically, you guys were talking about price discrimination earlier. And I also know that there's the difference in cost of capital and what Black businesses pay when they are even approved for loans. And, they're not approved in many cases. I think it's incumbent on CEOs to take personal responsibility to, we talk about institutional and systemic racism, not to see if, but where in their organizations racism is showing up. And to look at the data, to analyze the data, to hold themselves accountable, and also to hear from voices they haven't heard from before. So I think there's a huge role for not only CEOs and corporate boards, but just corporate leadership to play if we're really going to make 2020 different and we're going to make the road forward and the next administration different. There has to be engagement from the private sector like we've never seen before. And I'm encouraged by some of the action that has followed some of the words, but there's a lot more work to do. And that's a place where I think the President of the United States has the largest bully pulpit in the world, where there's a real opportunity to see a different level of engagement between the public and private sectors, and for that to be led by bold action taken by CEOs.
And I'll just add very briefly, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Darren.
Did you want to go? I'll just add very briefly that, being an entrepreneur and a CEO, it's a very unique experience. I think anyone that goes through that journey, understands it. And if you haven't gone through that, it's, you're not going to have a full breadth of everything that a CEO and a business owner goes through. That's why I am so passionate about this topic that we've been speaking about today. And I know a lot of local entrepreneurs and business owners and CEOs that, there's that really believe that there's an opportunity with the Biden and Harris administration. But I think it's very important that this opportunity that we're in, these last couple of months and what's going to happen in these next few months, that we capitalize on that and we don't let these businesses really fall under, because that really has the potential of happening in these, within this next year, if there isn't some type of safeguard to really protect these CEOs and these businesses that are really fueling local communities. I mean, it really starts with these local businesses that employ so many people and really fuel these local economies. So I just think that there's a huge opportunity for the Biden and Harris administration to really tap in what's going on with some of these entrepreneurs and CEOs out there, specifically our Black entrepreneurs.
I'll chime in and try to speak very quickly here, but I agree. I think that any notion of supporting Black businesses during this time needs to be something that's really done for impact and not for a publicity or for PR. And I think that across the board in private sector, we're seeing some of that. It has the potential to be that if we as business leaders and Black CEOs don't step up and call it out before it gets to be that in full totality. And I think as CEOs, we have an obligation to do that. I also think as a business leader that it's very important for us to see ourselves as part of the change that we want to see in our communities. I know, for example, Walker's Legacy helped to fund nearly 100 college students to get home when COVID first hit, because we recognize that many college students across the country actually just don't have the money to get back home. And that was an ask and a demand and a request that was made of them without a real forethought on how much access to disposable income their very households had. We're also very excited to be doing the first ever COVID research impact study on minority women entrepreneurs that's been funded. And lastly, I'll say as a response to this access to capital issue, we are in the next 2 weeks going to be announcing a $10 million fund to support Black businesses. I won't say with who on this call, but you'll see it later. And so these are some of the things that we have stepped up to the table to support, to be championing, and to be advocates. This is not the time for Black business leaders to be shy or to be demure or to be worried about what their relationships are and what they'll look like in the next 5 years. This is the time for us to stand up for a moment in history that we can't ever recreate. It's the time for us to give voice to moments and to people in communities who don't have the privilege to be in the same room as us and to share in their experiences. All of us are Black business leaders on this call, and all of us have been impacted by COVID. And if my impact and David's impact and Darren's impact and Mike's impact is what is going to lead to be the tipping point, then I'm happy to share it. And I'm happy to share it on behalf of our communities. And I'm happy to do so with a sense of obligation and a sense of pride that it's important that I not step around the issue and try to manage the relationships, but that I go at it with veracity, because that's what our community needs right now, because we're in dire straits. 40% of Black businesses haven't made it past this moment. We haven't even gotten to the end of COVID. None of us on this line want to see us get past 60. We don't want to see us get past 40. We can't do that by placating everybody all the time when it comes to what Black businesses need during this moment. And it also requires that we put our mouths and our money where our mouth is and be the change that we want to see in our community as we're demanding for these larger organizations and for our federal government to do for us as well.
And can I make one quick final point, which is a bit of a shameless plug, but it's relevant to this discussion, and we get nothing out of it from BEA. I just think it's important for people to hear this discussion and for all of us to be pushing on the people who have the ability to actually make some change. Tomorrow night on CNBC from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time, there will be a 1-hour special called Race and Opportunity. And it is something that BEA helped put together, and it'll be an hour special hearing from a lot of these big businesses who have made, statements about race and saying Black Lives Matter, and hearing from them what they're going to do going forward. And even having a conversation like that on a platform like CNBC is something that wouldn't have happened 6 months ago. And we need to continue to push the envelope and ask for more and push folks to do more than just talking.
David, can you repeat for us again when that's occurring so we can just put it into the chat for everybody?
Sure. It's tomorrow, September 8th, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. And the name of the program is Race and Opportunity. And it's being co-hosted by John Ford, one of the few Black anchors on CNBC, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Can I say one thing, Binta, while you're typing, which is about PPP?
Please.
A lot of Black businesses have either received information or in some instances misinformation about PPP. I would like it to be very clearly stated that if you are an independent contractor, you have access to PPP funds. You do not have to have 2, 3, 4, 5, 50, 500 people working for you to have access to the PPP funding program. And I encourage people to really do their research and understand that you as independent contractors, you as sole proprietors, you as LLC, single member LLCs, have the same access to PPP funding that a multi-million-dollar corporation does. This comes down to using the Google, the whatever platform you're going to use to learn more about the access that you have to this. I have already seen so many times people talk about the fact that Black businesses don't have the employee ratio that other our contemporaries do, which is true. But in this instance, PPP does not actually allow you to count an independent contractor when you go to put forth what your final formula value is going to be for how many funds you need. The reason why is because independent contractors have the ability and should take the ability, if they need it, to file for PPP on their own. And that is the same thing with unemployment. I have to say that because for the first time in the not so recent history, independent contractors actually have access to unemployment also. And these are things, if you need it, you need to be aware of it and you need to use it during this moment.
So I just want to once again thank all of our incredible panelists. Like I said earlier this evening, we could easily do 2 or 3 hours with this panel and still not have enough time. But as it stands, we are past time. and we want to be respectful of everyone's Labor Day or the conclusion of Labor Day. Much deserved day off for all Black business folks, all of whom, all of us are laborers, whether we are union or not. We all labor, and this is a much deserved day of rest for those who've been able to take it, and for those who couldn't, at least maybe hopefully you can get some time off this evening. So I want to thank everybody and then turn it back over to Michael for his closing remarks, and then we're going to get some call to action and closing remarks from the campaign itself.
Definitely, and thank you for that. I put some things in the chat. Allow me, the last few moments of this conversation is prompting what I'm about to say. If we don't win this election, we are the ones most damaged of anybody. And I'm going to ask that we treat the next several weeks with the level of urgency that we have not treated in a previous campaign. I said to someone a week or two ago, I go back to being with then Senator Obama back in 2006, both campaigns, White House, etc. I was never scared if Romney or McCain would have won. I am genuinely scared if we do not do what we need to do if Trump gets reelected, of what it would mean for us as a people. So one thing I'm going to ask, and this is a little off plan, but there was a lot that happened here in terms of resources that I think we need to compile to get back out to our Black businesses that was shared on this call itself by Darian, Natalie, and David. That if we can, Chris and Trey and Binta, huddle up with them on email separate from this, there's a lot that we need to get out to our people who need help that we can help support with. I mean, I put one of the things in the chat, Operation Hope just expanded out, I think a $10,000 to $25,000 grant program, not a loan, grant program that they're working on. Natalie just mentioned several things as well here itself, in particular the independent contractors itself. So one thing as a way we can be helpful is for us to regroup there. And it definitely seems like another conversation on the national level seems applicable for us to do soon, given what this conversation has led here. One. Two, as we're moving forward, I also put in the chat, and you can copy and paste this on behalf of Augusto and their team. There are several Black specific and led fundraisers that are coming up that if we care about the Black business agenda, we care about Black folk, we care what's happening here, then we need to support our causes to bring this all home. There's African American Leadership Council, was chaired by Marcus Mason. We have the event this Thursday with Clyburn. We all know we have another event that's coming up that David and others we've been talking about, date TBD itself, that we need to be supportive of. If we want to see these things happen, then we got to be in the game. And we have to be fully at the table, everybody. In that way. And lastly, to that point, because several of you are asking this off chat and several of you are asking this directly. Now that the expanded leadership of the transition has been decided upon, there's a lot of policy and transition conversations that you want to see happen that won't happen from the campaign itself, but we can make sure as outside allies direct you to those persons so that you can start talking about what you want to see happen in the Biden-Harris administration. Which needs to happen immediately. Because look, everybody, we don't have the time and luxury to wait until February, March, or April. We need to be ready on day one to save Black business, day one to save and salvage what's going on in our communities. And so that effort there is essential and a part of that. So again, let's come together. We will get you follow up. And I've been saying them a lot, but Chris and Trey will sync back up on this. The contracting question that was raised earlier, we'll get back to you on that. We'll get you all a summary document, everyone, of ways to be helpful to the Black business community that you all have been seeing. We want to make sure we mobilize with you for another national conversation quickly, because it's clear there's a lot of conversations that are emerging that we need to tie up. But as I turn this back over to Chris, to Trey, we got to be in. We got to be in. I don't know what else we need to see right now, and I'll be damned to let this racist, sexist, xenophobic clown. Because for all of us, Chris and David especially, who had the honor of working in a real administration, there's no way in hell what happened the last 2 weeks would have ever happened in an Obama-Biden White House. They would have been losing their mind if we would have put a political event on the grounds of the White House. They'd have been losing their mind for a naturalization ceremony to be done during a convention. They are willing to watch us physically and economically die. Hopefully that was direct enough to get everybody's attention. And so I would think and hope that everyone will be all in. So the links are there. We are in. We have to win. We will mobilize. I also put in the upcoming states so that you can start thinking about your networks. The three of you have massive networks, so we can build that out, and everyone else on the line. We thank you. We love you. I'll turn it over to Chris to help bring us home, and then Trey to give us next step homework as well. And to the panelists, you all are phenomenal, and we're going to keep building with you, and let's stay connected as we go from here. Chris, over to you.
I appreciate it, Michael. Binta, you guys did a phenomenal job this evening. And once again, a round of applause virtually for our panelists, Natalie, David, and Darian. You all have done a phenomenal job and truly have highlighted and illuminated what we really need to be discussing and focusing on right now. And we're going to continue this conversation. And Michael, thank you for that homework for us, and we're going to carry that forward. Really just wanted you all to know that this is happening every Monday. Make It Happen Mondays is the Black business experience for the Biden campaign. Check us out. As Michael stated earlier, we will be in Ohio and Minnesota next week. We have a lineup of other states that are coming up. So please check us out, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, tell a friend, tell a friend, and tell a friend. Text AFAM at 30330. And again, check in with us. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Trey Baker.
Thank you so much, Chris. And just thank you, Darian, Natalie, David Clooney, Mike Binta. This was phenomenal. This was a great discussion all the way around. And as I'm thinking about digital assets to put out and, things to elevate the conversation, to amplify it, this will be the one that we cut up and make the promo out of. This is the one that is going to be the commercial going forward for the rest of this. So I just want to thank you for this conversation. Here's the thing, y'all. What Michael Blake pointed out, what everybody's been pointing out here is that you cannot govern if you do not win. And if you do not win, conversations like the one that happened right here will not be happening in the White House. We're not building this structure of Make It Happen Monday just to keep it here on Zoom. We're building this structure of Make It Happen Monday so that these conversations can then become the policy that the White House carries out. That's why these conversations are so important. And right now, these conversations are not happening because they're happening here in Zoom. They're happening amongst us. And these conversations have to get out to the world in order to help our people. And so that's the first point. The second point is this, before we leave out and I give a little homework. People are voting right now. North Carolina, early or mail-in ballots open to get picked up last week. People will be voting as early as next week. And so it started. This isn't about November 3rd. This is about voting season. We have a voting season, and we have to bank as many votes as possible before this thing even jumps off. Because they're going to do everything they can to try to steal it. We've already been told in North Carolina, and the president has encouraged people to vote twice. And so with that headwind, we have to do everything that we can to do it. So like everybody else has said, stay engaged with the campaign by texting AFAM, AFAM to 30330 as a first step. As a second step, come back to Make It Happen Monday. Every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we're going to carry this road show all across the country. We're going to bring these guests back on at some point because we might need to do a part two. And then the next thing is there are opportunities across the campaign through phone banking, through volunteering in general, to just be a part of what we do here. So if you take that first step, if you text AFAM to 30330, we will communicate with you. We will let you know exactly what you can do and how you can be involved with the campaign going forward. So with that said, I want to thank everyone. I want to particularly thank our media partner, Black Enterprise. Black Enterprise will be with us streaming out to all of their social media over the coming weeks. And hopefully we will get a rebroadcast of this one on Black Enterprise because it was just that good. So thank you to our media partners. Thank you to all of our guests and everyone here today. And please continue to come to Make It Happen Monday, and continue to be involved with the Biden-Harris campaign, because these conversations need to get to the other side. So thank you, and everyone have a good night.
Please include your handles, everybody, of the panelists, so we can support their causes right there before we wrap up.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.